Hello and welcome to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past and talk about their impact and relevance today. I'm Tim Longo Jr., and I'm joined as always by a man who has no qualms about using a space-aged alien flamethrower on cute little enemies.
Brett Duvel. And no, I do not. I have no qualms whatsoever.
I could not believe that the first weapon you get is a flamethrower. I was like, that's
the second
illegal.
One. You start with the bomb glove.
Okay,
yeah.
The second, sure.
The first one you buy is like, the roast-o-matic, or it's the pyro, whatever. But it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, I just thought it was just not. I mean, it's cool, of course, and so we are talking about, if you did not listen to last episode, which you probably did. We were talking about Ratchet and Clank, the first game from Insomniac, 2002.
Not the first game from Insomniac. First PS2.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, totally wrong on that. The first Ratchet and Clank. The first of the series, but the third series from them. So they did Disruptor and Spyro, and now this for PS2. Yes, and so I'm referencing a weapon that you purchase in that game that is obviously it's a cute little mascot game, and then you get a flamethrower. I'm like, wow, okay, I see where this game is going then.
Exactly. It's only going to go further in that direction. And therein lies a lot of its charm and sort of its sense of humor. It's very tongue in cheek, and a lot of that stuff we'll come back to. For sure, and we'll maybe touch on it even a little bit this week. But we should first, since we're starting a new series, set this a little bit in time. This was a 2002 game. It was the, I believe, second year of the PlayStation 2. Is like 2.5 year of the PlayStation 2, which I think came out in the fall of 2000. Second full year or whatever, and here in the States, I should say as well. It was a game. We've played a number of games from this year, and I'll just rattle them off quickly. Hitman 2: Silent Assassin, which was, I believe, our second game ever. Kingdom Hearts, Eternal Darkness, and Animal Crossing. So a bunch of games that we've played from this year. Actually, all in all, a fairly good year. I don't normally think of this as a year that people call out, but it's a huge GameCube year because this was, I think, the launch year of the GameCube. And so you've got a new Mario and Super Mario Sunshine. You have Metroid Prime. You have Wind Waker.
Wow.
And Animal Crossing that I already mentioned, and Eternal Darkness, which is not a huge hit for them, but a critical darling and kind of a smaller success, definitely a critical success. And that's just the GameCube games. In fact, probably the best GameCube year, to be honest. I mean, I can't think of another GameCube year that has that kind of heights in it. Those are all good games. Of course, Metroid Prime was one that we played and quite enjoyed and informed Republic Commando a bit. So, but it's also a year in which the PS2 and the Xbox, which had just come out in 2001, are going strong with Sly Cooper, Mech Assault, Splinter Cell. I'm going to see here if I have any other that are console games. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, the games that I've already mentioned. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, which for my money might be the highlight of that whole series. I don't know, 2 is pretty good too, but that's a PlayStation 1 game. Apple's
Phantasy Star Online.
Oh, yeah.
Episode 1 and 2.
I played that a bit with co-op with Andrew. So another game I played a bit from that year for sure. And lots of great PC titles. Warcraft 3, a big one for you for sure. One that I have still not played. I haven't played StarCraft 2 either. I kind of had gone off of RTSs by this time. Jedi Outcast was one we called out. Freedom Force, which was a game that I really liked. That was from Irrational Games Australia. Jonathan Shea was the sort of lead guy on that, who had split off and gone back to Australia. Long time Irrational kind of guy. And Dungeon Siege, Elder Scrolls Morrowind, Elder Scrolls 3, No One Lives Forever 2, an absolutely fantastic game. And I hope someday that becomes available to players again, because everyone should experience the delight that is No One Lives Forever 2. First one's okay, but the second one is delightful. I cannot, of games that I've played and laughed in, that is pretty high on the list. Neverwinter Nights and Battlefield 1942, which I can remember playing the beta of, I believe, as you know, in that fall before a game that we happened to have worked on came out, which was Jedi Starfighter, which came out early in 2002 as well. So
I just saw another one we didn't mention that probably bears mentioning because of its weird kind of far-reaching influence, and that's Rez.
Oh yeah, another great game.
I
love Rez.
Saw it up there in Mizuguchi.
Yeah, I still have my copy of Rez. I quite like that game. That is quite a maybe someday we'll play that one. That would be fun to revisit. Yeah, so it's actually, I mean, I think about all those titles, and that is a pretty good slate for any year. I mean, we talk about the years I entered and left LucasArts, 98 and 2004 as really kind of amazing years, but this is a pretty good year. I played a lot of these games when they came out. Oh, and I skipped over Metroid Fusion, which was another one I did play at the time on the Game Boy Advance, and that's fun to mention now because Dread was just announced and is coming out like in a month or maybe two.
Yeah,
so
sequel.
Long-awaited sequel that they were working on a version of not too long after 2002. I mean, that's a game that I think was first announced in like 2005 or 6 or something like that, and is only finally coming to consumers.
Wild.
So, yeah, it's amazing.
Probably
proper
the same,
2D Metroid.
Yeah. Interesting year. It's not, again, with those other ones that you mentioned, like 98 and 2004, it's like there's games that I think those are thought of because there's a handful of games that are just completely legendary, but
right.
But the overall year maybe wasn't as, but this one just has kind of like a thick coat of peanut butter of good, good games kind of strewn about. But anyway.
Yeah, I would say, this year is like a year that has a very high average, but maybe not quite as many peaks, as like, right. There aren't a lot of games on this list where you go, oh, that redefined X, Y, or Z. It's more of like, one of the things we were talking about in pre-show is like, oh yeah, you can see they're really duking it out with the mascot games, that there's a bunch of them. Because you've got Sly and you've got you've got Mario, of course, is making an appearance. I mean, I wouldn't call Link necessarily a mascot, but he's certainly a well-known character on those systems. Samus, same thing in that regard. So there's a lot of that going on. And there's some stuff we didn't even mention. There was a Sonic game this year, etc. So it's a pretty big year, and those ones that we called out are quite a slate. Vice City was also this year, which was the Grand Theft Auto 3 follow-up that is sort of the more 80s and pastel inflected one that I actually was playing a bit back when we did our GTA 3 series, and actually kind of preferred that game because of its tone and because of its Miami Vice-ness. And the soundtrack especially was like, oh man, this is cutting right through to an uncritical part of me, because it's early 80s music or whatever. So
there's a rumor that 6 is going to be in Vice City.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I have not heard that.
I read that recently, but yeah,
maybe we could give the Grand Theft Auto another chance.
Yeah,
maybe not. Yeah, it'd be tough to do. I still feel bad about. I still feel like we maybe did that a little wrong, but
I do not. I'm afraid.
Anyway, well, it is a
I know
game.
what you mean.
Yeah, it's a game that, hit a zeitgeist in a big way and continues to, and it completely did not connect with us, but we did not address why it connected with other people, which is, I think, a misstep a little bit. Anyway, that was back early days. We've learned a lot since then. Anyway, let's move on. So this was, I guess, the 5th title from Insomniac, which is a company I have followed a ton, especially since this point, although I had also played Spyro 3 prior to that. I think that was one of those late PlayStation 1 titles that I had picked up because it was coming out around, not too long before that we got our PS2s at LucasArts. So there weren't a lot of PS2 games out. Most of the ones that were good we had in the office and I had played a bit of, and I was looking for other things to play on the system. That's when I played Final Fantasy IX. I played Final Fantasy Tactics, which was loaned me. I played like Tony Hawk 2, and I picked up Spyro 3. And this is I think this is when they were already pretty close with Sony before that point, and now, of course, in the last couple of years, I believe Insomniac has actually joined Sony, is now a Sony studio, but they managed to be third party all that time, which is a long time to go it alone. And they did almost exclusively Sony or PlayStation titles, with a few exceptions, the Sunset Boulevards, and I don't even remember what they called the game that they published.
Sunset Overdrive. Yeah.
Sunset Overdrive. Sorry, did I misspeak?
Sunset Boulevard is a different.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the movie.
I would like to play that game.
I would too. You start at the beginning of the game and you're dead in a pool. I love it. But I forget what they ended up calling the game, that 4-person thing. Are they also like Fuse or Fusion?
Fuse. I think it's called Fuse.
And that was with Microsoft as well, and it I think it suffered from that partnership, I'll just say. I think I played Sunset Overdrive, and that was quite fun and felt in line with stuff they had done before in a way that other game did not. And I haven't played it, so I shouldn't really be too down on it. But I remember seeing their first video for it and thinking, wow, that looks really cool. And seeing their second one going, I might give that a miss. Whereas I've played every mainline Ratchet and Clank game over multiple, except for the latest, which of course just came out on the PS5, which are as rare as hen's teeth. And so I haven't gotten a chance to play that, but I'll get to it someday. They had a very fruitful partnership, not only with Sony at the time, but with Mark Cerny, who around this time, and we've probably talked about this before, published in Game Developer Magazine, RIP, his Cerny Method, for how to build games, and what, how to structure games. And this is a Cerny Method game. He consulted on this game. He consulted on the Spyro games. You can feel the sort of, especially as we'll play more of it, and we can probably talk about it in greater detail at that point, but you can feel the sort of accretion of powers, and abilities, and sort of like managing different sorts of resources, like constantly gaining these sort of capabilities, but also like how each level distills down to like its own self-contained experience. Of course, you can revisit them. You can kind of come back to the levels later. There's secrets, like there's lots of sort of console stuff, but this is a real style of game. And his style, I think, is imprinted. I think these early Insomniac games really owe a lot to Mark Cerny, as does Jak and Daxter, the Jak series at Naughty Dog, which didn't have an entry this year, but feels similar. I'm not sure he worked on Sly Cooper, but it has the same feel. And that, I think, is why at this era, PS2 was really giving Nintendo a run for their money as far as this sort of game, this sort of third-person cartoony action platformer, whatever. Ratchet & Clank doesn't really completely fit that mold, but and neither does Sly, and Jak and Daxter's probably the closest in that regard, and really just kind of leaning into what Super Mario 64 had kind of laid out on the Nintendo 64 and running with it. So anyway, this is your first time with a Ratchet and Clank game.
Yeah, it sort of relates to what you were just saying as far as all of those mascot games you just mentioned were on PlayStation, versus, talk about for Sony to kind of over index on going after Mario or something, and I think we talked about it most likely when we played Mario 64 and even Super Mario World. I'm just not I'm definitely not a fan of platformers, and I typically haven't ever really been a fan of mascot oriented games. I don't know, just not my thing. I think Sly Cooper 1 was maybe the only mascot game I had finished in sort of this era, and mainly because I just love the style of that game. But this is definitely the first one of these. I maybe played a little bit of Spyro, never played a Jak and Daxter game, never played a Crash Bandicoot game. I'm looking at a list of mascots as well, and to Brett's point, there was such this, that was the first person shooter version of first person shooters on PC, but this is console, right? So the war on console seemed to be mascot games, because you have, you also have Rare in there, right, with Banjo-Kazooie and others, Conker's, etc.
Yeah, Bad Fur Day, yeah.
And then you have Crash, you have Sonic on the Sega side, which is sort of its own weird thing, but still obviously mascot, Ubisoft, Rayman, and then, we don't even need to mention all the Nintendo ones. And then, and even the, lesser known ones like Gex from Crystal, which I'd always talk to folks there about. But it was everyone was, and then you have lesser known ones like Croc or Bonk or,
Croc. Oh my God. Yeah.
It's all these funny, and
I feel
Blinks,
like they tried to make Frogger do that. Oh, the Time Sweeper. Do I remember Blinks?
Yeah. See, so this is
that was also, though, the split between PS2 and Xbox, right? Is that Xbox was going after, certainly you had Halo kind of paving the way, and they were sort of going away from a lighter tone, let's just say. I don't know that they were exactly going full on gritty, because I don't think anybody was ready to dive in and do that exactly. But they were trending in that direction. And a couple of years in, they'd be doing things like, Max Payne on the system. I think it might have led on that. I don't remember. They were both selling pretty well.
It's like
they did Brute Force. They were doing sort of gun game, games, instead of sort of lighter, the mascot games, like you're talking about, very character focused, colorful, and cutesy, really. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. Like I said, I love these games, so it's in no way pejorative for me to say it's cutesy. I love its lightness.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think Xbox's strategy, which they, first of all, it's called the Xbox. Second of all, it was a PC and it was coming from a company that was, and that's why Halo ended up being such an interesting example for what they were trying to do for, so yeah, they attempted some things, they originally had that deal for Psychonauts, right? As an example of something they were dabbling in, and then they ended up buying Rare, which was sort of their solution, I think, of trying to lock down some of this mascots oriented stuff.
But then they'd go and, I guess they made Viva Pinata, and then they went and did Perfect Dark Zero. So they were kind of buying them for both sides of the pedigree, because previously they had done GoldenEye, so. Yeah,
GoldenEye, and they definitely had reason other than their mascot stuff, but they did make, more Banjo-Kazooie. They did Nuts and Bolts, and then they did Viva Pinata and stuff. And yeah, and so they're still going. I've become a fan of Sea of Thieves. But anyway, so yeah, this wasn't, I don't know, it just wasn't my thing. I was a PC shooter guy, I guess, and kind of like a little bit in the darker tone, and I just never could get into these. And I didn't really know much about Ratchet and Clank, to be honest. Like I bucketed it into all of the games we just talked about for the most part. And I guess, right off the bat, I'm like, I was confused when I started this game, because I was like, wait a second, I knew they were, I guess I knew and had heard obviously that there was a lot of gunplay, but I guess I just didn't realize sort of how much and how third person shootery actiony, it was in that regard. And I assume, based on sort of like how I see things, when I'm looking at the menus and stuff, how I see things going, that it will only be more sort of projectile based guns coming.
You're in for a treat, my friend.
That's awesome.
For a treat. Yeah,
that's good. Because I don't.
There are things
really...
about the guns that you don't know yet that you're going to be like, what is going to happen next week? I predict, or next episode, I predict oh my god from you.
Really interesting.
Yes,
about the gun, like about any gun.
About any gun. Yeah, I'll say that even.
Huh. Weird.
It is gonna be a surprise. There's a thing that I don't think you see coming, and it's just gonna happen at some point, and you're gonna go, "They did what now?"
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. There's some great stuff to look forward to. I mean, this is one of those games where I'm like I think I said last time, this is my 5th time playing this. Twice through on the normal difficulty, twice through on the New Game Plus, which is more difficult, but also has like a building multiplier. So that, like, every time you kill, you get a kill streak basically, and you get multipliers on how much the bolts are worth. So instead of picking up a bolt that's worth 1 bolt, it's worth 20 if you're at I think the max multiplier is 20. So you're like, every time you pick up a bolt, it's worth 20. So you're just like crazy amounts of money. That you're picking up all the time. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I don't want to. No,
it's good. I mean, it's good. It's good.
It's a fun surprise when this sort of reveal happens. But yeah, this is a game like,
it's good to plant the seed, though. And I mean, before we move off of Insomniac completely, I wanted to mention Resistance, which is another series that was a very opposite from Ratchet, but they were doing in tandem with this, but also a first person shooter.
Right.
Or not also, but a first-person shooter. So it was interesting, that Ratchet kind of is another shooting-oriented game. But yeah, I'm glad.
Have you ever played any Resistance?
Yes, I did. I played the first one. Yeah,
the first one is the best one, in my opinion.
Okay.
I played that. I've played all 3. It took me forever to get around to 3. I bought it years ago and then finally played it like 3 or 4 years ago. And the first one has this like stiff upper lip where the Brits, fighting against the alien invasion. And then the second one feels like somebody said, hey, this should be more like, Call of Duty or Medal of Honor. Still the alien thing, but like that, and it becomes a lot darker, a lot more. It becomes it's an American focused campaign from that point on, I believe. So you're in America. You're not, this, and you're an American. You're not in the British. I think you're an American in the first one, but your commander is like Agent Carter, right? I mean, you're basically talking with Peggy Carter. That's her name, right? Peggy.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it has that kind of feel to it. It's a definite, and there's like rhythm to the game in a way that the second one loses a lot of that. The third one's better, and they all have great design ideas in them. One of my favorite ideas ever was in, I think, the second one. And so they always find ways to do clever stuff. But to me, that's the game series that has most exemplified their cleverness and they're willing to just pour a ton of stuff into a game are the Ratchet and Clank games. And, I've played like 8 of them.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list here and I'm just like, geez, yeah, I mean, that's they have definitely doubled down on this sucker. And then the other thing that, I mean, their titles are just so hilarious.
Yes.
I'm looking at them, it's like Going Commando, Up Your Arsenal, Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, A Crack in Time, Full Frontal Assault, Into the Nexus, All for One. Oh, that All for One was something else. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't think I've played All for One. But...
Wasn't that like a weird multiplayer thing?
Right, exactly. And that's why I didn't play it. And I feel like one of them was sort of a tower defense game, sort of. That might have been that one. Like I don't remember at this point, but yeah, I mean, I've played, and most of those games I have played at least twice, and the original trilogy I have played twice each. 4 times each, right? Twice on the PS2 and then twice again on the PS3, to play a second time through on New Game Plus. So. Yeah, these are close to my heart, and it's going to be hard to find any flaws. It's basically perfect games. No, it's also interesting to play the first one. When I played this trilogy again, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, one of the things that was really interesting was things that I had forgotten, like interaction modes that I had forgotten were like the way they did it in the first game, that they so streamlined going forward. There's going to be some stuff that I think you're going to be like, this is not great control wise. And I'm going to say, yeah, they knew that too. In the next game, it's just a button. It just happens automatically. It's very contextual. We haven't gotten to any of that stuff yet. And it's still not horrible by any means. It's just, you wouldn't do it. It's to the point where you're like, oh yeah, I forgot they even did this way the first time, and then later on they're just like, well, we know when it's appropriate to do this thing, so we'll just, it's just a button now. So
people moved on.
Yeah, you'll see some smoothing of the controls or over literally just these first 3 games, and then it's pretty set, I think, after that. So.
Well, and a couple other things to mention about the franchise that shows sort of Sony's commitment to it, because this was Sony exclusive, but for a time, I'm trying to look right now. It looks like maybe Insomniac retained the IP the whole time until they were purchased.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. While Spyro, those who may or may not realize, Spyro did go to Activision eventually because they bought it from Universal. And then, of course, Spyro is the basis for the Skylanders franchise, which a lot of people don't realize.
Yep.
It's the same.
Yeah,
same
Toys for
thing.
Bob. Mm-hmm.
So that's why they wouldn't have been doing those anymore. But they kept this, and then they also did a Ratchet and Clank movie, right?
Yes. And the PS4 edition was kind of like loosely connected and based on that.
Right, and it kind of, but it was also like the story and the remake game was sort of based on this first game, right? As far as them meeting and stuff like that. So,
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, they have their own sort of Pixar-esque, IP here, and my understanding, and I always hear about this, and always wonder if it's true, but like especially from that PS4 game and then this new PS5 game, like people say that it is, from an animation standpoint, up on par now with film, like just the cinematics and just even the character animation and the fidelity is like, off the charts.
Yeah, that's possibly true. We should probably, I'll have to go back and research this. I remember a Game Developer Magazine article at the time, and I think it was either this game or Sly, and it might have been both. I mean, they might have been talking about both, and I don't know which, who wrote it. Like I said, I'd have to do some research to try to figure this out. But talking about one of the things that was sort of technical canon at the time was like, you can't do stretch and squish in video game characters. That was just a thing that people said you couldn't do. You technically, I don't know if it was a technical hurdle or whatever. And Sly definitely did those things. And this, I'm seeing a little bit of it, not a lot. So I don't think they're pushing it in a crazy direction, but it gives that cartoony feel, that cartoon physics feel to the game that I think also gives it a lightness of tone and things like that. It's not all rigid, hard things. It feels very organic. And, I don't, like I said, I'd have to really I tried to look at it closely enough and to be able to determine for myself, okay, is that actually stretching or is it just camera framing? It's very hard to tell, because I don't think they push it very far in this one. Though I think Clank himself might later, because there are points where you play Clank. So.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Well, right now he's just my backpack and I want him to do more. And I'm sure he does. No, to that point, I don't know what the technique is exactly because like you said, it's not as much rigid body with a rig and bones and stuff. But I did a test when I was playing yesterday. If you turn the camera facing Ratchet and you just kind of walk slowly or run slowly toward the camera and you watch his body, the model is morphing and bouncing the geometry is bouncing as he's moving toward the camera, and you can see it obviously much better when you're doing that, his face and his head. So I don't know how to describe that exactly, but I was actually, the reason I looked at it is because I was like, what's going on with so they're doing some technique there that seems advanced for the time to make him feel more alive or, less rigid or something. It
is bones. It is animated sort of how we animate things today, although this was when that was first starting. This was a time where you could do, something like at most 64 bones, I think, maybe 32 on the PS2. I can't remember because we weren't really doing that sort of thing on the games we worked on the PS2. So I can't remember exactly. Yeah. And you could have up to 4 bones influencing any particular, vertex. So this was when that really started. Those were kind of the hard limits to be able to kind of do it in one pass in the VU, the virtual unit. Is that what that stands for? Anyway, the vector unit. In Vector Unit 2, which had the 64K of memory, that was basically the constraint, right? Is like,
Vector Unit 2, sure, yeah.
Actually, I think it's Vector Unit 1 because I think it's Vector Unit 0. And
that's right. Vector Unit 1, that's right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Vector Unit 1 0 only had 4K, and this had, I think, 64K. Anyway, so there were hard limits on like what you could actually do with the hardware and be able to do it all in one chunk of memory and like do it in one basically pass over the thing. Very great. I mean, the PS2 is such a cool system, but
is it?
It's like, I wish I could develop on it now, like that and the cell. Like, knowing what I know now about programming, like having gone through a couple decades of programming, I'm like, man, those systems are so cool. I've had programmers younger than me say, "Oh, you were so lucky you got to work on the PS2." And at the time, I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Just give me a compiler that works with my code that I write on the PC. So. But since then it's really changed for me. Like, I love the weird constraints that these older systems have. Anyway.
So basically, then in that case, they're just using their
I got off.
Well,
they're using them really well, and they might be doing some procedural modulation of the bones, right? That they can just mix in. Yeah,
feels like but maybe it's sort of the equivalent of early hair or early dangling bits, but they're just applying it to his face, so it almost looks like fur, right? It's like I'm guessing that they wanted it to feel like, because he has fur all over him, of course. I don't know, something like that, but it's just, I don't Mario definitely didn't do that kind of thing, so although that was 4 years earlier, but I think that was 98, right? no, it must have been earlier than that.
96, I think.
96, yeah, okay. So anyway, but I guess Sunshine came out this year, and their big thing was water, but I don't think the character was doing many interesting things there. So anyway, it's interesting to see. It's always fun to go back and look at this stuff, and the other thing that I think we'll probably talk more about as we go is the other thing I've been happily surprised by, again, not because this wasn't my thing and I never really knew much about it other than very, very third hand. It feels like for this kind of game, they're already doing a fair amount of world building that makes me feel like, a little bit more interested in what's going on. You know what I mean? Like it's all obviously fun, Saturday morning cartoon kind of villains and those sorts of things. And those are fun. But there's just lots of, they introduce characters pretty early. They have multiple planets. Now I guess structurally you can see that you can travel to any planet once you find it, which is the world structure is. So anyway, there's just a lot of, when I opened the menu, I saw a list of things that's going to happen during the game. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea. So that's kind of cool.
They continue throughout the series to find ways to riff on structural stuff and like to find different ways to tell different characters' stories. Some characters you've already seen, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but a lot of the characters in addition to the main two, you're going to see throughout the series, and their stories are going to evolve over time based on just building off of what happened in previous games, and they're really committed to that. And it's a very, very character focused universe, in a good way. Like I don't, it doesn't feel weird. Like we've talked a little bit, I don't know how much on the cast about like how Star Wars feels hyper melodramatic because it's all basically this one family, or whatever. And this is a small cast of characters. The villains tend to change more so than, sort of the main characters. But, some characters recur and you just kind of have this ever growing sort of cast. But there's just this sort of tone that is very consistent throughout. Like there is not, a gritty Ratchet and Clank reboot out there. They're all this, right? I mean, you can tell by the names. Like you read all the titles. The latest one is called A Rift Apart, which, if you switch around the consonants a little bit, you can kind of get where that might be getting at. They're jokey and goofy and juvenile in a pretty funny way. Like I think it's the second game where there's a boss fight with like a giant mech or something, but it's like a humanoid shape walking around the city, and at no point do they explain to you about his weak point, which is basically his underwear. So, they just don't say anything. They just put it out there. They let you discover that the weak spot is, like the superhero undies like that are on over the pants or whatever is like how the thing is constructed. And they just never say anything. They don't comment on it. It's just there. It's just part of the goofiness of the game. And I can remember the first time I, played that and being like, oh man, I cannot figure out what I'm supposed to do here because it's literally not highlighted at all. And then you just like discover it and you're like, oh my God. And you're laughing at how stupid it is, how silly it is.
Was that in Going Commando?
I'm pretty sure that was in Going Commando. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So yeah.
The clue was in the title.
The clue was in the title, and I didn't pick up on it. But yeah. Anyway, these are games that are just a delight for me. In this one, we've started out very economically meeting Clank and Ratchet. We don't know a lot about either, except that Clank is a mass-produced robot that has somehow gone wrong. Because you see the robot construction line of them coming out, and they're enormous giant robots, and he's like equivalent of a
the
foot
runt
tall
of the litter or something.
For sure. And then we see the major enemy, cartoon enemy, Chairman Drek, who is describing in a sort of PR announcement, how they're going to have to take apart this planet, which will unfortunately, kill everybody who remains on it. but they need it to, because they've destroyed their own planet, and they're going to just take the best parts of other planets to make their own new home. And it's, rife with, sniping at capitalism and sort of corporatism and
class.
Class. Yeah.
Class stuff going on. The two games that it reminded, they're heavily reminded me of from the past, that there is sort of that sort of comedic sci-fi genre, subgenre, if you will, that we've played, Space Quest, of course,
sure,
and Anachronox, sort of, especially like with some of the stuff on some of those planets you go to in Anachronox that were so commentary humor, with the planet remember that. Anyway, yeah. So when
Democritus, you mean
Democritus? Yes, Democritus, hilarious.
The planet
example.
Who's a party member. Yeah.
But meeting
Stiletto. Anyway, still I think my favorite name of any game we've played.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, but yeah, meeting this villain. He's like right out of Space Quest in a way, and yeah, very clear.
I mean, he's literally a worm, right? He's just, it's so good.
With like with like slicked back hair somehow.
Yeah. It's like, he's got that kind of bulbous, and then it's just like the thinning bit at the end of the worm. It's just like tucked back like it's a slicked back ponytail. Oh, so yeah, it's definitely of a time. I guess the early aughts, probably that was a style, for, Wall Street or something at the time. Not the ponytail so much, but the slick back, sort of hair. Probably still is for all I know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we played just that, and then, the planet where they meet, which is it was a lot briefer than I remember. I think I was actually conflating that with a later title where the sort of first world is actually a little more complicated. And I think I was conflating it with the first PS3 one, because I remembered a lot of mechanics being introduced that were not introduced here. And so I've played so many of these and so many hours of them that they get mixed up in my brain. So we also played Novalis, which is this planet where Chairman Drek is going to come and take parts of the planet away. And I guess the president or whatever, has been arguing with him, and he shows up and gives you a new ship. It's really funny to me that Ratchet has spent all this time building his own ship, finally gets the last part he needs, which is this robot, and then they crash land. On the first planet is totally destroyed. Yeah. It's hilarious. I mean,
they just leave it behind, and so lightheartedly leave it behind. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they don't make a huge thing of it. He's not upset about it. It's just like you're just moving on, just constant movement. It has that sort of Warner Brothers cartoon feeling of just like constantly moving. Animaniacs or or older cartoons of just like, nope, we're Bugs Bunny. We're just next thing, next gag, next gag, next gag, and that is a large part of its appeal for me. So,
yeah, and I that first on Novalis specifically, I love the structure. The world structure is giving me hope for something that I didn't realize about the game, because there's definitely a linear section that gets you to sort of progress the story, but there's also these sort of like spokes that go off of that you, I guess, optionally can do, because I don't know. I mean, I did them,
I don't think that there's any. Well, so you don't have to do them now. I don't think there's any planet that's optional in the story. I'm not sure. It's
Well, planet or more of wings.
There are routes in this world that you don't have to do this first time here, but you'll be able to come back. Like I'm pretty sure you have to do the stuff with Skid McMarx, the hollow board rider. Yeah. Hollowboard athlete, and you just kind of find these things. But you're definitely, if you want to get everything out of these games, you need to come back. There are hidden collectibles and things like that are inaccessible to you until you get other gear and stuff like that.
That's
very
what
much
I figured.
In sort of vein. Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, again, just that sort of like leaving your ship and then going to the screen where there is even the fact that there is a map at all is interesting to me, which these games don't typically have. And then the fact that there's quests apparently or something, like on the map UI, you can like, click a button to see your quests, I think it said, and
Yep.
and then leaving and then picking your planet. So it's like, it's just, there's more. And then, yeah, like I said, from the menu, you can glean some things that are coming when it comes to like light RPG elements with gear and weapons and all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, I'm optimistic. And the first level was simple and fine and fun, and I don't think there's maybe necessarily too much to talk about with it yet, but, but yeah, I mean,
you have what, three or maybe even, I think it's three enemy types. You have the flying dudes, you have and you have the robot dudes, and then I feel like there's one more maybe up where you go to the plumber. There might be one more enemy type, and like
there's the big guys that shoot.
In the mushroom caves or whatever. So there's a few different types of enemies here, and there's a lot of variety in this game. It's also, like I alluded to earlier, it's colorful. It's just beautifully colorful and cartoony looking, and they really get a lot of mileage out of instancing because you can add a lot of detail to worlds in that way on the PS2 hardware, because you're just drawing the same thing multiple sizes and places, so you just have to like do one matrix multiply basically to like put it in the world. So there's just a lot, and that can be done really really fast. So one of the strengths of the PS2, as were the sort of particle stuff, which is why you've just got tons of these bolts whenever you hit a crate or whatever. We'll talk about all of this stuff in the future, but it's a lot of like how this game feels comes directly out of the hardware, and what it's really really good at.
Interesting. Okay.
Which I appreciate as a programmer for sure. Like the games we were making, not at all perfect for the hardware. I mean, we probably could have made them for the hardware better than we did, but and that didn't happen for historical reasons. But yeah, I mean, there's just, they knew what hardware they were working with, and they really built to it. And I think that is becoming less and less a thing as time goes on, because the machines are, more and more just PCs, right? I mean, they might have their own drivers for their particular weird graphics card that they have that has some whiz-bang thing on it. But fundamentally, the longer we've gone, the more like PCs the consoles have become. And this is an era where there's really wild, experimentation across three very different pieces of hardware in the same generation. This generation and the next are kind of the end of that. The PS3, Xbox 360 era with the Wii is kind of where that all just diverges. So, after that, it's PCs and whatever Nintendo's doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I will figure out over the break what we should play next. But we should put a pin in this game there for now, and we will I will put out on the social media how much to play next. It'll probably be quite a bunch of levels, because while there's more to do, and certainly levels become tougher and things like that, there'll be a sort of some non-linear stuff. It'll be like up to us whether we play parts of it in each week or what have you. We'll sort of feel our way through that as we normally do. I don't feel like this is going to be a long series for us, because I don't think, although there's a lot potentially here, I think discussion wise it'll start to reveal itself next time to you, and then there's just a lot more. So this is definitely like, one of the things you talked about with JRPGs, where it's like, and then they did this thing, and then this thing, and then this thing. I think this game has that, but in a framework that feels a lot more coherent. Like it's all sort of, it's a lot more of one thing, but there is a huge amount of variety in that one thing, which is which I really think you'll appreciate. So
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't. I wrote down in my notes, like, we couldn't have gotten further away from Final Fantasy VI with this game. I feel like as far as like complete opposite experience when I jumped into this, because we've been playing
for sure
6 for so long, and I'm like, oh, and now yeah. So quite a
you
change.
know what that means. That means it's time to dip into our feedback about Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, of course. Yes, we have some unfinished business. So
still, and we'll probably bleed into the next episode as well. These are shot to devgameclub@gmail.com. Because you were the host this week, I will go first.
Okay, good.
Because I gave you the longest email again. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to just basically do two on one on either side. This is from Ryan. And Bio, who we mentioned, about our interview a couple times ago, is helping us figure out to do that. He says, the title is just FF6. Hey guys, hope you're well. I just wanted to share that Final Fantasy VI was the first game I fell in love with, I think in part from the music. Having only previously had an NES with mostly platformers and movie tie-in games, Top Gun, Ninja Turtles, DuckTales, this game blew my mind. Friend talked up this game so much we made him bring it and the system to school so he could bring it to my house for my sleepover party. My 12th birthday party in 1995. Yeah, I mean, I was only 10 in 95. And my first all-nighter. I remember it taking a while to set up using the RF out and a channel switcher on an old CRT. Thanks, Dad. Since it was a quote, 2-player game, we were able to rotate among the 5 or so of us, with the player who was player 1 getting to make choices on overworld towns, but we split it so they had control of the 2, quote, less fun characters in battle, and the other one of us getting the, quote unquote, more fun characters. For 12-year-olds, inputting blitzes and choosing tools was fun. Constantly stealing was not. Giving me a little guff there. The friend brought the guide his older brother had bought with him, so I recall being mystified at the advice of ignoring treasure chests because they would yield better stuff later. Something Square put to good use in Chrono Trigger. You may remember that, Tim. Jury rigging some sort of rubber band style device to hold a button down to take advantage of the Leet River infinite loop to grind while we ate pizza. We even skipped singing and cake to get back to playing. I remember being quite upset that a game let the bad guy commit mass murder in Doma and disliking Edgar the character, but he did have cool tools. Needless to say, we mainlined the game and got further than we should realistically have because we had the guide for boss strategies. I believe we made it to Setzer's introduction before everyone had to leave. Unfortunately, Kefka destroying the world was a mind blower that came later. Ryan. And then he mentions a number of secrets, and I think most of these are new to us. Some of them I've alluded to. As with Chrono Trigger, I just wanted to mention a few secrets or tidbits. Characters who rejoin in World of Ruin are adjusted to what level your party is currently at, making it beneficial to do a bit of grinding before collecting everyone.
Yeah, I had that suspicion.
Yep. You only need 3 characters to beat the game. I mentioned this last week. Celis, Edgar, and Setzer, which would each solo a party in the final dungeon. To see Shadow's 5 backstory scenes, have him in your party and sleep in inns. You can battle Final Fantasy series staple Cactuars in a desert in World of Ruin. Beating them nets 10 AP and 10k gold pieces, making spell grinding easier. Edgar's final tool, Air Anchor, is odd. If you hit an enemy with it after their next move, they are hit with death. I didn't find that tool, so that one I missed out on. You can buy 2 Espers at the auction house. How about that? There is a hidden boss encounter while flying the Falcon. Fortunately, the boss is hidden in a random pixel and flees after taking damage, but it is weakened over time. Beating it nets you the Bahamut Esper, which is like...
What?
Oh, yep.
A hidden pixel? What the? That's crazy.
Yep. It's funny. Somebody was like, I ran into that. I think it's the enemy he's speaking of, twice. I didn't know about the, like, it accrues damage over time. Like you just have to keep beating it. And I had somebody in the stream say, oh my God, that took me hours to find once. And you found it twice, just totally like not looking for it, totally randomly. I was like, yep. That happened. Let's see. Brett got Ragnarok the Esper, but you can have that old man craft it into a sword, which is the second best in the game, but it's the best way. But it is the best way to get the spell Ultima. 2 other ways to get Ultima are unrealistic. Terra learns it at level 99 or from the Paladin Shield. The Paladin Shield is, quote, unlocked by using the Cursed Shield in 256 battles. Yes.
What?
Yep. In the ancient castle, no spoiler for its location, there is more lore about the War of the Magi and My Last Dragon. There's one dragon I didn't find, and apparently that's where it is. There's an Esper in the ancient castle who also gets upgraded there. And then some relic stuff. When Bannon asks you to join, say no a few times, and you can backtrack to talk to an NPC who gives you a Genji glove. This is just wild stuff. Some of this stuff. When you get Mog in the World of Ruin, search the room to find the Moogle Charm relic, which eliminates random encounters. Using this really makes the Cult of Kefka Tower much easier. Oh yes, I bet it would. There's also a relic called the Experience Egg in Daryl's tomb, which doubles experience gained. There's a word puzzle to solve to get it. Yeah, I was in that tomb and thought there was something I had not found. Like I felt like there was a path I hadn't gone down, but I didn't go back for it. In the Dino Forest, if you battle Brachiosaurs, they have a chance of dropping a relic, Economizer, that makes all spells and summons cost only 1 MP. And there's a ton of good stuff to get at the Colosseum. Yeah, I've seen some of those lists. So that's those are the dozen or so secrets that had not been brought up before that Bio sent in. So thank you, Ryan, for cluing us in on all of that, because that's quite a lot of stuff.
Man, that's overwhelming. I mean, geez, there's so much in there.
Yes.
But I mean, I guess
yes,
obviously you don't need to do it to finish. But
no, clearly. But it is like an era where that stuff was packed in and expected, and like that was part of the fun was, what else can I find? Like, I mean, we found that with Chrono Trigger, and we both found a lot of stuff in that game after the fact. So, yeah.
Wow, thanks, Bio. Yeah, this email is epic. I'm worried we may not have enough time for it today, but I can try it.
I think you've got time.
Okay. All right. Okay. I guess, is it more of a, I assume you've read it, so is it more of a story?
It's more of a story and not lots of questions. Discussion. Although there may be some,
It's like there's maybe a question at the end, but okay.
Yep.
All right. So here we go. The saga of trying to play and complete Final Fantasy VI, Part 3, by Mark Garcia. This is an excerpt from his novel based on the topic. Greetings, Brett and Tim. Chapter 3, Picking Up the Pieces. At the cliffhanging season finale of our last email, our hero had finally started to play Final Fantasy VI, but made the unfortunate and foolish decision to seek out the allure and delights of other JRPGs. Additionally, it was revealed that Darth Vader was actually Luke's father. Han shot first. Sam and Frodo had been ambushed by Gollum, and wait a minute, sorry, wrong stories. Without further ado, I give you the conclusion of my attempts to play Final Fantasy VI. Apologies for the length. First, a bit of background and world building. As mentioned in my previous email, I wouldn't actually finish Final Fantasy VI until 6 years after I started playing it on the PlayStation 1. During this 6-year gap, I had successfully completed a bachelor's degree in biology from the university in the greater Boston area, and had applied to, been accepted to, a cellular and molecular biology PhD program at the Institute of Philadelphia. When I wasn't doing research or attending class as part of my education, I was either publishing an online magazine about pirates with my best friend from college or playing games. Okay, I guess we'll just let that one be. The DS Lite had hit the streets and was the hottest thing. I procured one of the white models, that is one of the better models, and used it to not only play DS games, but also Game Boy Advance games. At some point during my hiatus from Final Fantasy VI, Yeah, this is a journey, man.
Yep.
It had been released on the Game Boy Advance, and I snagged a copy of it, though it remained in a shrink wrap tucked away in my closet. Around this time, the GameCube was also starting to fade into popularity as the Xbox 360 and PS3 and Wii were on the horizon. I happened upon a GameCube on eBay for a little over $100 and snatched it up, but I didn't stop there. I also picked up the attachment that Nintendo made. Oh, okay. That would allow you to play GBA games via the GameCube on the TV. That was a great attachment. I think both of us had it. You still have it.
I still have it.
This meant that I could start playing the GBA game on the go and then plug it into my TV when I got home to play it on a larger screen. This somewhat.
You know what I also had?
What?
I actually went and bought an attachment that was a TV screen.
Oh, I remember that.
A little monitor that you could also put on top.
Yeah,
so it's like you put this thing on the bottom, put that on the top, and it's the world's biggest DS or GBA.
Yeah.
But I had it because I think I was playing Metroid Prime at the time, and I came to Maryland. Maybe it was 2, and I came to Maryland for interviews, and I was like, man, I'm here, and I can't connect my GameCube to the TV because it was a hotel TV that like didn't have connections or something, and like you couldn't get at them. Yeah. And I was like, well, I can't live this way. I've got my GameCube. I came all this way with my GameCube. So that's why I bought it. Anyway.
That's definitely crossing the streams. That's an early Wii U actually is what you were doing there.
Exactly. Yes.
And so let's see. This meant that I could start playing GBA on the go and then plug in my TV when I got home to play on a larger screen. That's also called a Switch. This somewhat primitive precursor to the Switch, which would be the critical 1-2 punch that would help me see the credits roll on Final Fantasy VI, but it wouldn't be the driving force that would lead me to pick it up again. That would come near to the end of my tenure as a grad student. Okay, next section. He actually has a dividing line here for some reason.
This is where it gets a little more sober.
Okay, our preliminary exams were quickly approaching in my second year of grad school, and I found that I had slipped into a deep state of depression. There were several factors at play in this. For one, biology research is oftentimes presented in an academic context in lectures as something that just works as you perform relevant experiments based on your hypotheses. What you find once you pull back the curtain on it is how many times you have performed specific types of experiments based on previously published data that yield little to nothing that you can publish or put towards your dissertation. My research was based on rat cortical tissue, which meant because they were slow-growing brain tissue, that cortical neurons had to be grown over the course of 3 weeks before I could ever perform experiments on them. This meant that there were 3 weeks of prep that could precede an experiment that would ultimately yield nothing as far as results went. Yikes. I was in quite a rut as I felt my job had me going into work for 50 to 70 hours a week to perform things that were destined to fail. This feeling of demotivation and depression was then exacerbated by the fact that I felt that I was cornered. I could continue to finish up my preliminary exam, hopefully passing on, then continuing on towards a PhD, knowing that I was never going to be happy and enjoy the work, or I could quit, pivot, and essentially consider the last 6 years of my life a wash in terms of my supposed professional goals. This all resulted in me feeling like any choice that I made would ultimately result in an unfavorable result, which further propagated my feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. To attempt to deal with the heightened anxiety and depression that I felt, I turned to video games, feeling that they could at least provide me with some smaller personal goals that I could achieve as a means of helping me to regain my composure. While looking through my library, I found my copy of Final Fantasy VI, pulled it out of the shrink wrap, and started to play. The stress and pressure of my work life being in flux intensified my depression, and I soon found it a struggle to even get off the couch. There were 2 weeks where I literally would Wake up, feel depressed, get dressed for work, feel depressed, play Final Fantasy VI for a few hours in lieu of leaving for work to stave off the depression, feel depressed, go into work for half a day and have my experiments yield no usable data, return home depressed, play more Final Fantasy VI to escape the depression for an hour, feel depressed, go to bed, go to sleep, and then wake up and do it all over again. Whew. My dip in attendance and performance at work was noted by my immediate supervisors. Fortunately for me, she was our supervisor. Fortunately for me, she was an amazing mentor and had me come to terms with owning my depression and pushed me to think long and hard about what I actually wanted to do with my life and also to seek professional help. She worked with me to find a counselor and helped me to start developing smaller goals in the short term that I could use to motivate me to complete my terminal masters. With her and my therapist's assistance, I started to come to terms with my depression and also started to accept that I was unhappy in my profession and needed a change. While all of this was going on, I was still playing Final Fantasy VI. Interestingly, I happened to have hit my lowest point in my depression right before my supervisor called me in to talk about my performance around the time when the world is broken. Oh, and Celeste finds herself separated from the rest of the party. It was at that moment when all of my previously mentioned gripes, nitpicks, or issues with the game faded. Celeste and I were in similar situations, and together we were going to make it through them.
See, this is why I let you read it.
This is getting to me, Mark. I saw so much of my plight in Celeste's situation that I remember shouting no out loud when Celeste attempted to take her own life. I wanted her to push through her depression and carry on, not to give up. The irony of my feeling that way for her, but not for myself, was not lost on me at the time. As I continued to work on handling my depression, I couldn't help but notice how Celeste's story was mirroring my own. She was traveling around a broken world, finding, helping, and rekindling the relationships with friends she had met along the way. I was navigating a shattered reality of what I thought my professional life would be, but I was making progress on finding out what I did want to do with the rest of my life, and friends, family, and colleagues were coming out of the woodwork to support me and help me network. Final Fantasy VI was also played a critical role in keeping me motivated at work. I could take the game along with me so that I could grind while waiting for experiments to complete. Even if the results of those experiments weren't favorable, I shrugged them off and started over. If Celeste could press on, then so could I. Before long, my entire party was well over level 50, and I was actually starting to get data that could be used toward my terminal masters. By the time that I finally beat Kefka and the credits rolled, I had completed a thesis and defended it. I had a job lined up for the summer, and beyond teaching, a passion that I still hold to this day, even though I have again shifted professional responsibilities, and my depression was nothing more than what seemed like a brief blip in the grand scheme of everything. There are only a handful of games that I have played that have coincided and mirrored events that are transpiring in my life at that time. Undertale is another such game. I have not gone back to replay Final Fantasy VI since this time, not because I am afraid that it won't hold up, but because I think because I like the idea that the one time that I played this game through to completion was the one time that I needed to do so to help me through a rough patch in my life. Still, it has been fun to listen to you both play through it and recall with a fond warmth how it helped me through one of those dark times that we all experience during our lives. Sorry for the lengthy email, but thanks for reading and taking this journey down memory lane with me. Keep up the great work, and as always, thank you both for an amazing podcast. Question, time pending. Since you have both discussed at length the battle system and its strengths, flaws, are there any ways that you feel it could be improved to make it better, more engaging, or fun? Tim, beyond having enemies visible on the map, would you just want a Bravely Default feature that would allow you to turn random encounters off completely when you want to explore, and then crank them up when you want to grind? Best, Mr. Mark Garcia.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing that, Mark. It's hard actually to hear it as well. We've talked about before, and actually I think in connection with one of your earlier emails, about how it's can be really humbling to hear how games, help people get through things. I mean, we've worked on games that's been true of. That's a thing. It's one of the rewards that we get that we don't expect. Like, to hear from folks who have been having a hard time, and played one of our games and sent mail or, whatever forum posts, those sorts of things to that reach us, right? Wherever we are. I had those with Skyrim. I've had them in the past as well. And I know Tim has as well. And it's always, it's, I don't think we make them with that in mind. Like I said, it's kind of an unexpected thing because for us, it's an entertainment. I mean, it's our art, and we want it to be part of people's lives, but we don't normally think of it in these terms. So it's always humbling to hear that.
Yeah.
And just kind of broadly speaking, that the games do it as a whole, whether it's a game we've worked on or not. So it's always a nice reminder that our games reach out to people sometimes when they just need them, and that's a big responsibility in some ways, but also just a big balm for us. Sorry, that probably didn't sound right. BALM. We're talking about Ratchet and Clank, and I'm saying bomb. That's a bomb for our souls. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
as to your question,
yeah, I mean, before the question though, I just, I mean, it's Final Fantasy VI is a journey in and of itself, and Mark, it was brave of you and to share that story or those chapters, those many chapters with us and with the listeners, and definitely appreciate that. And as you could tell, I barely kept it together reading it, not knowing where it was going to go. So yeah, and it is nice. Like Brett said, it's nice to know that the games can have that impact on people, because I think we all, I think anyone listening to this probably, and I know Brett and I both, it is an art form, and it is something that can have that effect on people. And these stories are important, I think, for people to hear about games, because it isn't just a product. It isn't just an action fantasy or something. They're definitely much more. And Final Fantasy VI specifically is definitely much more. I'm now not surprised about everyone's reaction to it and nostalgia for it. And so thank you for sharing, for sure. You got me, Mark. You got me.
See, I know. Like, I have to scan these things in advance and go, okay, yeah, I think I'll have Tim read this one.
It's not hard these days, but
yeah, he got me in the past for sure. I mean, for me, I think the one thing that I would look for, I guess, a little more in the and this kind of goes in that direction, so it's kind of on the right path for me as far as JRPG combat. These days I'm looking for new lenses on it. I love the Final Fantasy 12 one. I've mentioned that before. I actually like some of the things that were in the ones, not 13 itself, but like the 13 extensions. Although, it actually played out pretty well in Final Fantasy 13 at a certain point once that game finally got going. It did some interesting things as well. Like, I look for a little bit more dynamism in the combat, where you feel like you're reacting to conditions on the ground a little bit more, and it doesn't feel so rote. Like a lot of how I play Final Fantasy VI is like I'm just hitting the same thing again and again and again. Like I love that the characters do different things, but even that, because your party doesn't change frequently, feels like it isn't quite enough. So it like I would want a little bit more from the enemies, but they're definitely moving in the right direction. So for me, those are the biggest things. The randomness bothers me less and less as time goes on, although there are definitely dungeons where it bothers me more here. So that's not really a thing that eats me. That's more Tim's thing. How about you, sir?
Yeah, it's a hard big question because it's so ingrained into how it works. So it's hard to say. Like it's. I think I'll take the random encounter part of it off, because that's really sort of like, not only do they apparently give you options to be able to not necessarily do that, whether it's a chocobo or whatever, and some relics, but it's just sort of ingrained into things. And I think that's an easy one to debate as far as like, you either like it or you don't. You can turn it off or you don't, But specifically, to be honest, like might be a weird one, but the thing that comes to mind for me is I don't know. I don't think, for me, with the limited Final Fantasy experience that I have, I don't know if the active part of the active battle system is really that useful or necessary. I just feel like, and this is a very gross sort of way to approach it. So I haven't really thought it through, of course, but I really think like just make it completely turn-based. Because the weight system isn't exactly it's not exactly just turn-based. It's like the even weirder hybrid, even though I had weight on, and I think you did too. And I just make it completely turn-based, and then give all of the enemies less health. I mean, and like, so that's what I mean by kind of like a very like clumsy solution, but I like the battle system. I like what each of the characters do. I want to do all of the stuff that they do. I don't want the stress of it. And I want them to be turn-based exclusively. And then I just want to get through them even more quickly than I did. I just think I would do them more, and I think the random encounters might be less frustrating to me. So anyway, that's just off the top of my head. I mean, the whole random encounter thing is a whole nother kind of topic. But
I mean, what I'm hearing, Tim, is that you feel you need to play more of these games, really, to see all the different ways this has been approached, and get a better sense of like which one is really your perfect solution. Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speak of the devil, one Mark Garcia,
yes,
has sent me a copy of the one that I probably would play next if I were to ever play one again, which I will try to do. And you and others have said that 12 does have an interesting spin on all of this. So I am very intrigued to see what that is.
And it has Han Solo.
That's what you said. Yes.
As well as a like 6'6" tall bunny woman. I mean, you can't go wrong there either.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's fair. That's a thing, apparently, especially, I don't know. I see the screenshots from Final Fantasy 14, so I guess that's
right. Yeah, the Viera made it there as well, and they had male Viera as well, I guess, in the Final Fantasy 14. So it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Okay, well, you need to get to your streaming, so I guess we'll start winding down, and we'll get to more email, even more next time. Like I said, we're gonna probably I might have done this pre-show, but we'll let you know on social media what we're playing to next. We're actually going to take next week off, a bit of a summer break. We both have that lining up for ourselves. I'm going to be away, and so editing would be kind of a lot to ask. And we probably want to schedule recording so I don't also have to bring a microphone with me. And Tim has family visiting as well, so it makes sense for us to take a little time off. I do think we'll do a sizable chunk of the game for the next thing. I think it'll expose a lot of stuff. But I don't think any of the topics like I said, this is a game that has like just piles more and more on, a sort of pile of a smaller pile of stuff, and that just like piles them higher. So I think that we'll actually be able to cover a lot of ground. And this story is fun while you're playing it, but it's not the most complicated thing either. So it's, we're not going to have lots and lots of depth to probe in that way. But I do think that there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about with this game mechanically, and like some of the things that we've touched on tonight. So it'll be fun to play a much bigger chunk. We'll let people know by Twitter, where you can find us at Dev Game Club. You can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
And, of course, we're on the web at devgameclub.com. You can also find us occasionally streaming at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr., where you're still stranding across America, I gather?
Oh, man.
Is that true, or did you finish this game?
Well, all indications were in the right direction, and I got to the coast, I beat the boss, and now I have to go all the way back.
I'm sorry.
I am not done. And
do you have to jam the square button to do it?
Yeah, maybe. I'm gonna jam something. And Calamity, as hilarious as he thinks he is Calamity Nolan. Like, yep, you got probably about 10 more hours left. So yeah, good luck going back east. So yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm going to sprint the whole way.
We'll see how that goes.
It's worse because I'm playing without vehicles, as another one of my...
Oh, right. My weird self-imposed... Yeah.
So it is what it is. I'm not going to give up on that goal now, but yeah, I don't know. Who knows what's in store. But I did get a rocket launcher, so that's something.
That is... All of that is something. I may at some point be back on Twitch. We'll see. I've been so busy, I've not had time, and I don't want to stress out my elbows and wrists. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and of course our logo is by one Mark Garcia, who you've heard quite a lot from this evening. Have fun blasting off to a far corner of the galaxy this week, and good night.
Good night.